I'm joined now by the vice chair of the DNC and the president of Leaders We Deserve, David Hogg. David, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So you have been very much in the news as of late in the aftermath of your announcement that you would be looking to primary Democrats who are in safe seats as an effort to, as part of a broader effort to bring fresh blood into the party and help our ailing approval rating. I think Democrats are in, roughly high 20% approval rating. And so there's been obviously a lot of pushback to what you're doing. So first and foremost, what I want to do here is kind of have a little back and forth and like a quasi debate, so to speak, and you kind of explain your positioning here against all of the criticism that you have received here. So first and foremost, I think the main thing is that folks are saying we should be spending money, attention, resources on winning back these battleground seats. And so why focus our attention, our limited resources on the Democrats who are in safe seats?
Look, I think it is possible for us to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. Leaders We Deserve is also focused on supporting candidates that are critical to gaining majorities for Democrats, both in the House and in state legislatures, where we did a lot of work last election cycle. So I would say to that comment, right now, we're going to have to spend several $100 million no matter what supporting, and by we, I mean the party in general, is going to have to spend several $100 million supporting frontline candidates that are critical to winning back the majority. If there are young people that are running there that are aligned with our values of Leaders We Deserve, we plan on supporting them so that we can win back the majority. We also need to realize, though, part of the reason we need to spend that much is because our approval rating is awful. And that goes beyond just what our candidates in our frontline districts are doing. That is a culmination of how all 200 plus members of Congress that are Democrats, what they do, and our other elected Democrats around the country. And what we're trying to do here is show how we're actively working to make sure that our members of Congress are meeting the moment. And this is not just about age. Yes, our candidates, they are younger, but we are not just challenging people because they're above a certain age. There are older and younger people. Unfortunately, there are people of all ages who suck. There are plenty of young people who are not great. There are plenty of older people who are not great. But what we're looking at is it's not out with the old and in with the new. It's out with the ineffective and in with the effective. Because I think if you look at Congress right now and think that this is the best that the Democratic Party can do, I think we need to dream a little bit bigger right here and having a healthy process of offering in some of these races, the voters, the option of voting for somebody else who is younger, typically, or at least more competent or less corrupt and able to meet this moment isn't a bad thing. When last cycle, we had $2 billion and we still lost. And I think part of that is because of our brand and approval rating as a party. And people say all the time, this is a messaging problem. This is a messaging problem. Sometimes it doesn't matter how good the script is. Shakespeare could write it for all I care. If you have bad actors, it does not matter if the message is not getting through.
Right. And so what does effectiveness look like? And this is a tack that I've been on for quite a long time, which is why this caught my eye, because I have been especially focused on this idea of fight. And the example I use, and I'm sorry for the folks in my audience who've heard me use this example a couple of times, but the way that the Democrats broach the topic of the parliamentarian. And if the parliamentarian says no, Democrats are like, well, that's it. The parliamentarian says no. What could we possibly do? Meanwhile, the Republicans see the parliamentarian say no, and they're like, fuck it. Let's just fire the parliamentarian if we have to. Right now, Republicans are engaged in a scheme to just outright pretend the parliamentarian doesn't exist. And so that is the asymmetry at play between the two parties. And so anyway, going back to the question for you, what does effectiveness look like?
What it looks like are people, whether it's AOC who's going out there and rallying tons of people who, by the way, got there by challenging somebody in a primary. Imagine if we didn't have her right now out there rallying tens of thousands of people. But it also looks like people like Cory Booker as well. And I know what it doesn't look like is saying, well, we're just in the minority. We can't do anything right now. Fuck that. We need to fight and show our base how we are fighting back, even if we don't have that much power. Sometimes what that looks like is people like Senator Van Hollen saying, you know what? I'm going to go to El Salvador to ensure that we're fighting to make sure that all people in this country have a right to due process and that we understand and we call out the Republican Party. When they go out there and say that they're the party of law and order, you cannot say that if you are not listening to the Supreme Court and you are not adhering to the Constitution and the requirements of due process within that in the first place. I think that is part of what that looks like. And what we're seeing are the people that are going out there and speaking and doing these town halls and doing these rallies and listening to the base are raising incredible amounts of money. And that is part of what we need to do to be able to support those frontline races is we need a base that is excited and feels like we're fighting for them. And what's not going to help with that is right now, if you ask people in a focus group if the Democratic Party was an animal, you know what the most common answer is?
I'm
A
afraid to
turtle.
hear.
A
Turtle.
turtle. A
Yeah.
turtle. You know what it is for Republicans? A shark or a lion or some other
Yeah.
kind of apex predator. People want somebody who fights for them. And I think what we need to do right now is show the American people, and especially our young people, what we are doing to revive the American dream and focus on issues that affect Americans across the board, across all races, across all ages. What are we doing to actually lower the cost of healthcare so that Americans, like my family, don't have to make impossible decisions, right? Where when my father was in the final weeks of his life with Parkinson's disease last September, his cost of care, despite being a veteran Navy helicopter pilot and a medically retired FBI agent, was $19,000 a month. The only reason why my family didn't go bankrupt was because of A, the Social Security safety net that Democrats built, and B, because my father unfortunately did not live long enough for us to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And there are way too many people having to make those decisions in this country right now. And I think what we got to talk about too is what are we doing to keep people safe from gun violence, right? Everybody, no matter if they're a Democrat or Republican, they want to make sure that their kid comes home from school. And lastly, what are we doing to reform our campaign finance system and fight against corruption? Everybody hates corruption. Those issues, I think those are things that we can get elected on, and then we can legislate on all the things that we care about.
So let's talk about money for a moment, because I know, again, going back to my first question, a lot of the concern, the consternation surrounding this was we should be spending money on candidates who are in frontline districts and not in, say, Democratic primaries. But where is the money for this particular effort going? I'm assuming it's from Leaders We Deserve, the organization that you're the president of. And if so, are the folks who are donating to Leaders We Deserve doing so for the express purpose of primarying these, what they view as weak, ineffective Democrats?
So what we do at Leaders We Deserve is we have worked in primaries in previous elections as well. Those primaries were predominantly just open primaries where, there was no Democratic incumbent there in the first place. And what we're doing here early on in the cycle is telling people, yes, this is part of our process, but we also understand that we need to defeat Republicans. That is part of the reason why we are doing this, is to help address our brand, not even address our brand problem. It's not even about that. It's about the fact that we're just fundamentally failing to meet the moment right now. And that is why our approvals are so low. As Donald Trump is trying to eviscerate Medicare and Medicaid, we unfortunately literally had 2 members of Congress that passed away that resulted in some of those happening. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. That is ridiculous that happened, because it's not just members of Congress that are paying the price for that. It is millions of people, Americans around the country, that are paying the price of that in the first place. And right now, we need to do some serious reflection on the fact that despite the fact that Donald Trump is disappearing people, despite the fact that he has crashed our economy and he is toying with people's lives and disappearing them for simply disagreeing with the administration, that our approvals are still as low as they are.
Right.
That is an indictment of the Democratic Party, and that is not going to change until we put a real call out there to say either we need to get our act together or you need to not seek re-election, because we are in a moment of crisis right now in our country that, frankly, far too many of our members of Congress, not all of them, but far too many of them, are falling short to meet.
Okay, David, to that point then, can I get your reaction to the fact that just this past week, Dick Durbin, who's been in office for decades and will be 80 years old, did announce his retirement?
It's a good thing, because now, first of all, Senator Dick Durbin did an incredible amount on immigration reform, on things like DACA, and so much more to help, promote democratic policies that have helped millions of people. But he has the maturity to know that he needs to pass on the torch and help mentor the next generation. And I have an incredible amount of respect for that. And we need more of that in our party. We should not have members that are knowing that they may very well likely pass away in office.
Right.
And with them, they're going to lose that institutional knowledge as well. We need to pass that torch down and train the next generation.
Well, and not just institutional knowledge, by the way. We may lose in the case of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, just lost the seat altogether because it's kind of ingrained in Democratic, like, our ethos that you just stay there kind of until you die, and that somehow if you've gotten that seat and you've earned that seat, that somehow you're entitled to it for the rest of your life.
And frankly, that's ridiculous. Like, there are incumbent members that have been there for a very long time that do a great job. And let's be clear too, there are some members that are there when they're older because they couldn't get elected when they're younger, like John Lewis, right? Who got elected when he was much older, that I think
Yeah.
certainly deserved that spot there. What we're looking at, though, is regardless of your age, are you effectively meeting this moment right now? And
Yeah.
what I think we could build more of a culture of in our party is if you know you're not able to meet that moment, either because you don't believe you're the best person to serve, or because you aren't able to, if it is your age or something else, that you have the maturity to step aside and not run for re-election. And we celebrate that as a party as being the mature thing to do to ensure that we have the strongest Democratic Party possible right now.
David, can I have your response to a story that just broke that the DNC chair, Ken Martin, is expected to unveil a proposal that would require DNC officers to stay neutral in all primaries, which the article here that I've got up on the screen says that would complicate your plans to primary longtime Democrats?
Look, I'm gonna have discussions with the chair, obviously, but ultimately, if there is not an agreement that we're able to come to, and they decide to remove me, I'm going to do everything that I can to support this party, and build the strongest Democratic Party possible. Because ultimately, my loyalty is to the Democratic Party. I'm not a member of this party because I think we are God's greatest gift, or that we're perfect by any means. It's because I believe in what we can be. That is why I'm doing this work. And I know that there are far too many young people that are losing faith in our party right now. And I believe part of doing that is ensuring that we have the best representation possible from Democrats across the board, especially in our frontline seats, and making sure that people know that we are fighting for them and the issues that they care about. But, I look forward to those conversations with the chair. And look, ultimately, if I get removed, I don't take these things personally. These are strategic disagreements right here. In the bylaws currently as it has, officers cannot be involved in the presidential primary. That makes sense. I don't plan on doing that as a vice chair of the DNC. I don't want a repeat of 2016 or any accusations that there's, some kind of, bias within the presidential primary. I totally agree with that. But let me be clear. The work that I'm doing here, I don't have any of the DNC's resources behind this effort at all. The money we're raising, that was money that we've been raising since before I was a vice chair. The email list that we have, those are all emails that Leaders We Deserve has curated over the past 2 years. And I don't even have access to the donor lists of the DNC.
Yeah.
So I'm not using any of their resources. And this is work that I've been doing long before I was the vice chair of the DNC. And if they decide to remove me, I will continue doing long after, because I believe it is an essential part of building the strongest Democratic Party possible.
And finally, David, for the folks out there who are supportive of your efforts and the efforts of those at Leaders We Deserve, how can they help?
They can go to leaderswedeserve.com.
Great. I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. David, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.